Hello, I'm Captain Rick Riles. Welcome to another edition of Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast. Hey, we got a fun trip planned for this afternoon. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to make our first stop over at Nosara, Costa Rica, where we check in with Craig Sutton to find out how the marlin fishing is there. That's my favorite destination. The second we wrap that up, we're going to hit Florida. We're going to go up into the northeast corner, check in with Captain David Voorhees, work our way down the east coast, up the west coast, and out the panhandle. And I've got a question for the boys tonight because it came up to me this week. We were fishing a offshore blue water tournament and pulling much bigger baits than we normally do. And sure enough, we caught a 36-pound dolphin. And I'm wondering, we didn't catch very many dolphin, even though the other boats that are around us caught quite a few. But we were pulling big mullet. We were pulling foot-long mullet. I want to know if our guys subscribe to the big bait, big fish theory. Or is that just a myth? I don't know. We know elephants eat peanuts, so let's find out from our pros. But first, the Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast is brought to you this week and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature together. By Tournament Master Chum. Oh, it's the best chum on earth, all right. By Nosara Paradise Rentals, your dream vacation. By D.O.A. Lures, the unfair advantage. By Young Boats. You want the finest in flats, bay, and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. By the Castaway Hat Company. That's the hat that's helping save our seas. And by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Right stuff, low price, every day. Okay, it's time for our first stop. Let's check out Paradise. That's Nosara Paradise, if you will, and talk to one Craig Sutton. Craigie, how are you?
I'm good, Ricky. Just got the photos from today. One of the boats just came in. The Wonder. Dude, and I was thinking, I guess it was Saturday that the mahi bite seems to be slowing up a little bit. But, dude, the one to come over today, it's a 40-plus, 45-ish. Just crazy couple small ones. But, boy, I'll tell you what, I'll take a 40-plus pound mahi any day of the week.
Now, you said all that just to rub it in my face that mine didn't hit 40 from last week, didn't you?
Well, did you really weigh that fish, Ricky?
Yeah, we really did, Craigie. I thought he'd hit 40. He did not. He was just under.
Yeah, no, he looked 36. I see that. Did you measure him?
No, I didn't. But he was short and fat. He looked a lot like me.
No commentary. but I just wonder, I'm finding that rule of thumb, that 1 inch per pound for the males over 34. It sure does seem to hold true. I talked to a guy out of Texas 2 weeks ago, caught a 62,
Woo! And
it was 62 inches, 62 pounds.
That's a fine one. Saw a great video of a jumping marlin from your place last week.
Yeah, we're still catching marlins. But there's Marciano's down there right now, and he called me last night. We were talking, and it was a little slow for him. Oh, by the way, we caught a couple more of those big yellowfin. Not 200, but they're 100-ish.
100-ish are good, son.
Yeah. But anyway, Marciano was telling me last night that he had a real big one pop up on the teaser, but he said he was just not super hot and heavy. He popped up and whacked at it a couple times and went away.
Yeah. I tell you, Craigie, I think I'm going to die wondering if teasers are good for marlin or not. I just can't.
Oh, I definitely think they are.
Yeah, really but here's what happens. Your best bite is going to be the first one. And we'll
put that hookless ballyhoo behind them, and they'll come back and whack them.
Oh yeah.
Hard. But this time of year, they've been pressured all the way up the coast. And even though we're just getting ready to start cranking our second season, everybody else is literally 3-4 weeks from shutting it down. But these fish have seen a lot of baits and stuff. So I know marlin, very rarely get shy, but I think they get a little spooky this time of year, especially if the current's not right, too.
Yeah. Well, it took me many years to become learn everything to become a perfect marlin fisherman, but I have finally achieved how to catch a big blue marlin. Do you want the secret or not?
Yeah. Because I can tell you honestly that what I believe today, you may ask me the same exact question 10 years from now, do something completely opposite. Go ahead, tell me.
I already know what the secret is to catching big blue marlin.
What's that?
You drive over the top of a hungry big blue marlin. That's all it takes, Cap. That's all it takes.
Well, but you got to, but you know, I understand Florida, but Costa Rica, a lot of times if you're taking a gun to a knife fight, you're taking a knife to a gunfight, you're in trouble. And we've had that many a day that, you know, you got to go super light, the fishing is spooky, current's not right. So you go 80 pound on your leader, and a 500-pound marlin comes in and buries it.
Well, what I probably should have said was I have found the perfect way to get a big blue marlin to bite. Drive over the top of a hungry big blue marlin. That's all it takes.
That's true. That is true, man, without a doubt, man. But I'm heading down there a week from Wednesday, going to fish our annual tournament. And, you know, talking about the big mahi, you know, year before last, me and Matt on one piece of debris caught a 48, a 44, a 41, and a 40.
Oh, yeah.
Pico had the Explorer had fished it right before we got there. They fished it for about 45 minutes. They got a 46 off of it. And Alex went the very next day and got a 51. Now, we weighed all these fish on the tournament scale, so we knew it. Now, that's one strong piece of debris. Buddy.
Oh, yeah. Well, you remember when I was down there last time.
I know. Your day.
We had four from 45 to 51. But,
that's just, man, you can't help but just love those big mahi.
I love them. All of them.
They got no quit in them. They eat good. Oh, they sure grow to be big.
Love them with all my heart. Brad Reed fished with me the other day, Craig, and he said something that just shook me to my core, and I know it's true. And you and I go back this far. We fished during those days. He said, for many years, the biggest mahi I had caught weighed 34 pounds, and I caught him at Paul Main's. Can you imagine catching a 34-pound mahi at Paul Main's today?
Well, yeah, and I'm sure it happens, or it may not happen, but they hook him up and they lose him. I can remember, you know, in the late summer, early fall, that a lot of 15s, 20s, 25s were caught.
Lot of difference in a 15 and a 34, Cap.
No, that's true. But like we just said, man, they grow fast. There's a lot of them out there, man. And I hope this year off Jacksonville we have a decent year. It sounds like with you catching that 36. What else did you catch the other day?
We had him and a wahoo, and that was it. The wahoo was nothing special. And we had a pretty nice box of bottom fish too.
What did the wahoo hit?
A swimming mullet. So did the big mahi.
Was that all you had in the water?
No, we had some ballyhoo and we had some eels. Archie from Strike Zone's a big believer in those North American eels that they pull up north for white marlin. You can pull them for an hour. You can pull them for a month. They look exactly the same, but it's crazy. Yeah. All right, buddy.
The guys in the Carolinas use it.
Yeah, that's what they use a lot for the white marlin. We appreciate it, Craigie. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Look forward to it.
Thank you, buddy. Captain Craig Sutton. Our thanks to Craig Sutton for a great Costa Rican report. Sounds like the big mahi and the marlin are still biting over there. Let's check out Northeast Florida with Captain David Voorhees. David, how are you?
Hey, Rick, I'm doing pretty good, man.
Good.
Survived this little cold snap, but, you know, just before this cold snap, man, we had some outstanding fishing this past week. We got some really clear water. I don't know if I talked about it at the last time we talked, but we had this cold water and clear water that came in off the Atlantic. And, man, I mean, some of the clearest water I've seen in quite some time. That, you know, we never really saw a lot of clean water this winter like we normally get. But, boy, we got it the last few weeks, and it made for some outstanding sight fishing, some of the best sight fishing that I have seen for redfish. And a lot of the fish some of them were caught back in the creeks, and we saw those fish. And then there was a good number caught along the intercoastal just before low tide on some of the sandbars and some of the mud flats just before the roll downs.
Yeah, you mentioned that highly unusual. You were able to see the bottom on the shelf at the intercoastal. That's unusual, isn't it?
Rick, it was so neat. The fish would come up. I figured depth-wise, we had probably 4 foot visibility.
Wow.
And it was pretty incredible because you could see that ledge, and a lot of times people don't see it. So I'm trying to get them to cast to it and bring their lure over the drop off. But, that wasn't the case. We didn't need to do that this week. And I tell you, you think you know it all, when it comes to fishing, and, you have a week like we had this week, and just everything that I thought the way the fishing would be, it was a complete opposite.
It
water, it was. We've had these very warm weather where the water temperature dropped 10 degrees in less than a week. So I thought for sure that's going to shut the fish down. Well, it did not. The creeks I thought would be warmer than the intercoastal. That was not the case. The creeks were actually colder than the intercoastal. And at low tide, I thought for sure the fish would have moved into deep water, and they did not. They stayed up on the flats and in the shallow water. So, they still throw me a curveball, and I think that's what I love so much about fishing.
Well, you know what our buddy Captain George says: when you figure that you figured them out, you can figure that you figured wrong. Hey, I got a question for you.
Exactly right.
I got a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I had an experience where I was pulling oversized baits the other day, and I caught a bigger fish than I normally do. And I wondered, do you subscribe to the big fish, big bait, big fish theory?
I do not as an inshore guide, and not as a red fisherman, because I've actually seen some of my biggest reds caught on very tiny flies, and I've seen what these fish eat, and sometimes they eat very small crabs, sometimes they eat little glass minnows. So you never know. To me, it's all a matter of matching the hatch, and we rarely get to see these fish eat anything big as far as the red drum. The red drum has a smaller mouth than, let's say, a snook or a tarpon. Their mouth is much smaller, and it's sort of located downward on the bottom of the fish. So they're not necessarily big bait eaters. I think the red drum, you're going to catch them on some of the smaller shrimp. And as a matter of fact, I tend to throw the smaller shrimp, and I tend to get rid of the big ones. I don't like to use the big ones. I think they make a harder splash. When I'm fishing for these fish in the shallows, I got to make a very quiet presentation. And sometimes a big shrimp will land and make too much noise and actually spook your fish.
Gotcha. Good point, David. Good point. I think it depends on species. I think you're right. Most of the guys that I know that are offshore that are complaining that they're not catching tuna when all the blackfin tuna come up, I can almost promise them it's because their baits are too big and their tackle's too big. Cap, we appreciate it. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
I'll be here, Rick.
Thanks, buddy. Captain David Voorhees with a very informative report. Funk and Wagnalls define symmetry as similar parts combined in perfect balance. Shimano and Strike Zone define symmetry as the perfect spinning combo for whatever your target this spring. You can't beat the balance and performance of the Shimano Symmetry spinners for freshwater and inshore saltwater. Outfits like Symmetry are the reason for shopping at Strike Zone. Not only are the Shimano Symmetry spinners the perfect balance between rod and reel, they're also on sale at Strike Zone for $99. One of the biggest mistakes most anglers make is fishing outfits that are out of balance. If you try to balance your own Shimano outfit, you almost can't get the most out of your cast inshore or put the maximum pressure on a sea monster offshore. The symmetry between Strike Zone and Shimano, the perfect balance for all your fishing needs. Our thanks to David Voorhees for a great Northeast report. Now, let's check in with Jim Ross in Central Florida. Jimmy, how are you?
Been pretty good this week, Rick.
Good deal. How's your fishing?
Inshore fishing is still fairly consistent. We were able to get some days in the inshore near coastal waters. Offshore has been non-existent. Did see the party boats run out a couple of days last week and promptly turn around and come back in within 20, 30 minutes. So I don't even think they got to the reef before half the boat was probably helping with the chum slick. So
yep, understand.
They turned around and came back in. So we don't really have much in the way of offshore reports right now, but we've got just a little bit of frontal situation that came through. We've got some hard north winds right now, and that's, it's creating some issues and some challenges in the lagoon when it blows straight down the lagoon. But one of the things that I found, especially around the Sebastian area, you can get inside the inlet there at Sebastian, or you can get around the spoil islands that are leading down to Sebastian. And you get out of those, you get in those leeward on those leeward edges where the channel is against the spoil islands, and it creates a pretty good flow. And the snook and the trout and the ladyfish have been fairly decent down that way. We've also still got good amounts of black drum throughout the system. We've got black drum that are anywhere from 5 pounds and all the way up to pushing 50 pounds in some cases. The smaller ones are against the shorelines and mangroves, and the bigger ones seem to be out in the middle of the river, out around the ICW channel edges, especially where you've got rocky edges, or a lot of the bridges, and they'll run from bridge to bridge. So you may check a bridge in the morning, come across the fish, then in the afternoon you go back there and they're not there again, or vice versa. You may check it and they're not there, and then you come back and check it later and they are there. So one of the things that I've learned here over the past couple of years when dealing with these black drum is just because you stop and you don't see them at one point in time, if you've got enough time during your trip, make sure you stop back and check and scan the bridges again, because a lot of times you will come across them.
Well, they sure don't have the grass flats to hang out in anymore, so I guess the bridges are their number one ticket. Hey, Jim, let me ask you a question before you go, and let's talk about, in your case, sea trout, which is one of your mainstays of your fishery. Do you believe in big bait, big fish?
Oh, definitely. Definitely when you're looking for large, especially those big gator trout, a big croaker, a full-size mullet, even a large pilchard is the way to get them. But I don't always subscribe to big bait, big fish. And the reason that I say that is because we catch a lot of big fish on very, very small baits. One of the baits that I use a lot is a small crappie bait made by Assassin. It's called a crappie dapper. And we catch tarpon on them. We catch nice size snook on them. We catch, redfish, trout, and some decent sized fish. So I'm yes, big bait, big fish, but don't overlook match the hatch. And if the hatch happens to be a small fry type bait, don't overlook that, because it can be extremely effective.
Well, and it's like I was telling David Voorhees just a minute ago. I've learned that a lot with tuna. If you look at the guys that are not catching the black fins when they're all over the top of the water, I can almost always promise you their baits are too big, because they're so often chasing those little minnows. Yep, you're absolutely right. Well, Jim, that's a great report. We appreciate the heck out of it. Give me the name of that crappie bait one more time.
Well, it's made by Saltwater Assassin / Bass Assassin, and it's called the Crappie Dapper.
Dapper. Okay. All right.
D-A-P-P-E-R, Crappie Dapper. And the gray ghost color is, if you only had one to choose from, get the gray ghost.
Perfect. Thanks, Jimmy. We appreciate it so much.
Take care.
Take care, buddy. Captain Jim Ross from East Central Florida. All right, now let's stop in Miami and check in with the Dean of Miami Charter Boat Captains, one Ray Rocher. Cap, how we doing?
Hey, Rick. How are you, buddy?
Doing outstanding, my boy. Doing outstanding. How's your fishing been?
Good. It's been a busier March than normal, especially for sailfish. The last couple of years, it was a little off for sailfish in March. It was kind of a little bit of a lull, and then April, May would usually get better. But this year, March has held strong, maybe even a little better than February. So no complaints. Not a lot of dolphin, not a lot of kings, although we're starting to see some of those, 10, 20, occasional 30-pound fish starting to show up. So we know April's near. And, a handful of other things, some nice muttons, and had a nice cobia this week while we were yellowtailing. Austin was running the boat. I think he caught one nice cobia and one really nice mutton, and yellowtails came up, and then the bull sharks ended the party.
Gotcha.
So,
yep, they will crash the party. There's no doubt. They're worse than drunk high schoolers. You're right. But well, I'm glad to hear about the uptick in your sailfish. Ray, I got a question for you. I love it when you and I get to talk because you understand a lot of my dilemmas. I fished a Wahoo tournament last Thursday, and I am not a high speeder, don't want to be a high speeder. So I rigged my best 10 to 12 inch mullet, and we actually pulled some American eels, like they pull for the white marlin up north. We pulled all big baits is my point, okay? And the only Wahoo we caught was not impressive. He was like 26. But there were a lot of boats around me catching dolphin, and I only caught one, but my dolphin was 36 pounds.
Okay.
Now,
that'll work.
Now, is that because I was pulling big mullet? Was that just a chance encounter, or do you believe in big baits, big fish?
Well, I believe in rigging my small baits so that they can catch big fish.
Okay.
Meaning maybe a little bit heavier leader. We're talking trolling. I broke off a 50-pounder one day on my little, I call it a tuna magnet. We make these tuna lures that have a little chrome head, like a half-ounce feather. And I used to make them with 40 fluoro, just trying to get the tunas to bite the blackfins.
Right.
And of course, I go by a set of birds, and we get bit, and big dolphin jumps, and we break him off. I thought we pulled the hook because we wound in a feather. I stiff rig that hook, a little bit better hookup ratio when I stiff rig it.
I do too.
And the mate looks at it and he goes, "Hey, we're just missing the hook." In other words, the crimp was still there. And sure enough, I baited that fish for another 30 minutes. I mean, we tried everything to get him to bite. So I got a really good look at him, and he was solid 50 pounds. And could not get him. Could not. I mean, we threw the kitchen sink and a treble hook at him and couldn't get him. And bottom line is, it just kind of reinforced to me that, you can catch big fish on small bait. Your hookup ratio, as long as you have a hook that has enough bite, big enough gap to get enough lip. One of the problems you have with a big dolphin is their lips get pretty thick in certain parts of their mouth, and you have a little 4.0 hook. It's just not going to get around that lip.
Right.
You're going to pull them off. But I'll fish, in a trolling scenario with an artificial, I will troll, one size bigger hook than normal and a little bit heavier leader and maybe fluorocarbon, not because I think it's invisible, but the abrasion resistance pays off.
Right.
And that's kind of how I set up for it. And I've been pleasantly surprised with some nice fish on small lures. Now, I have seen in St. Thomas and a couple other blue marlin places, it seems like the lure that makes the most splash and the most commotion will many times raise the first bite on a fish. So I think there is an attraction level, but my catch ratio on a big lure, even medium-sized fish, is not as good as it is on a small bait. A lot of these guys sword fishing will fish now like an 8-inch bait.
Really?
For swordfish, daytime swordfish, they're fishing like basically a 6-7 inch strip coming out of a short vinyl skirt, but they're hiding a 10-0 hook inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, when you cut a swordfish open and you see a lot of, 4 to 12 inch fish and eels in their bellies, you realize that they're opportunistic. And I know we're kind of jumping from trolling to day dropping, but the point is big fish will eat small baits, but you have to be rigged for it. And the challenge is, how do you hide a strong enough hook? One of the tricks is build a hook that's a little bit heavier wire gauge, but maintain the small, an appropriate gap, but don't go, enormous on the gap. Just
Right.
make sure so I refer to that as a kill hook. So years ago, I helped Mustad build a hook for marlin lures that was what I call a kill hook. It basically is take a 9.0 hook, but build it with 10.0 wire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's how we did it, and it works really well. I use it today.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my answer to big fish, small baits.
Okay. All right. Well, that's just the answer I was looking for. I appreciate the heck out of it. Captain Ray, please tell me we can check with you next week.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Captain Ray Rocher from Miami and the Miss Brit Charter Fleet.
You know what Yamaha Outboards love? The genuine formula and consistency of Yamalu marine engine oils.
What?
Outboards are subjected to punishing conditions like high loads, salt, and humidity, a mix that automotive oils can't handle. Yamalu full synthetic and marine performance formulas are certified to protect against friction and corrosion for reliable performance every time. Find Yamalu marine oils at your nearest Yamaha Outboard dealer. Locate them at yamahaoutboards.com/dealers. Yamaha, reliability starts here.
Hey, Raj, being consistent is the mark of a quality product. If you've been Florida's #1 chum for over 10 years, there's got to be a reason.
For 10 years, Tournament Master Chum has lived up to its name. That's why more tournament pros insist on Tournament Master than any other chum. It's the only chum with Menhaden milk mixed right in. That means it gets the scent out faster and deeper than any other brand of chum. It comes in a grind size for every species from kingfish to catching bait. Your fishing time is way too precious to use second-rate chum. Bring the action to you by insisting on Tournament Master Chum. It's worth every penny.
When you're ready for the finest in custom-made flat spay or inshore-offshore hybrids, you are ready to meet the Young family in Inglis, Florida. For over 21 years, the Young family has built custom boats one at a time for every type of fishing. Nothing can sneak up on a flat quite like the Gulf Shore flats boats, and I've never fished a better hybrid than the Young 24s and 27s. Rob Young is a naval architect who takes tremendous pride in each and every build for each and every customer that wants their boat custom built exactly the way they want it. Is it time for you to move up? Are you ready to own the finest boat built? Then you need to visit the Young Boat facility in Inglis, Florida, or check them out online at youngboats.com. Our thanks to Ray Rocher for a great Miami report. Now, I've got a question for our next action spotter. He's down in Islamorada, Florida. Captain Brandon Storen, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you doing, Rick?
Well, I'm fine, but I'm cold, Brandon. We've got a late season cold front. And that brings to mind a question I want to ask you. How many days a year do you wear a jacket to keep yourself warm?
Probably maybe a amount I count with my two hands. Maybe 10 days. Yeah.
Here's an idea. Why don't you go to hell? Okay, how's that? Okay.
I'll take it off. Then there'll be no days I wear a jacket then.
Because I am really sick of wearing a jacket. I promise you. Man, I went offshore the other day, had my jacket on, had my hoodie on, had my face mask on. I was cold, Brandon. I can't stand this weather. Tell me how your fish has been, son.
Our fishing's been really good up to this point.
Good.
We just had a cold front today. I don't love a late season cold front.
No.
I won't put that out there right away. We're trying to transition to the tarpon season. The water's just been going up and down crazy. Like, honestly, this past week, because we had a cold front earlier in the week. So the water temperature was like great, like 76, 77 degrees. Like, okay, things are popping off. And then we just had a cold front, and then water temperature dropped to like 72. And then it's like, okay, but then it got warmer a little bit, so then they could creep back up to like 74, 75, and boom, another cold front woke up this morning, 61 degrees outside.
Oh, yeah.
So not loving that, a lot of jumping around, but you've got to just kind of go back to the drawing board, like, well, what likes the cold? Well, these things do, and these things don't. So, yeah.
Hey, Brandon, to the rest of the world, 61 ain't cold in the morning, okay? Just so you know, 44, right, like it was this morning, is cold to the rest of the world, all right? It's all relative, my boy. But so your fish have been on again, off again with these temperature drops?
Well, it's just like, like a lot of the, we're trying to get into spring, right? So, Islamorada, of course, like, what they say is almost every fish in the northern hemisphere passes off our shores at some point here. So all the migratory species right now, they're playing red light, green light, right?
Yeah.
Like green light, all right, red light.
Yep.
Okay, green light, red light, particularly the tarpon.
Yep.
So, but you know what? The cobia, for me personally, has been steady. I've been targeting those a lot with these late season cold fronts, because that's something that passes by during spring, and water temperature change definitely moves them around, being like mainly a migratory species. Been doing pretty good on some snook. There's been some tarpon when that water temperature is nice and happy for them, and you're dealing with almost nothing but a north wind. The tarpon has been targetable. I've also been getting to our limited mangrove snappers whenever time we got people who want fish to eat. The sea trout fishing has been off the chain, catching plenty of big sea trout. That's been a given. That's been like, okay, well, this is not working and that's not working great. We can go catch some big sea trout. A lot of fun on artificial. Offshore, they've been still catching some sailfish, still catching some mutton, still catching some really nice sized blackfin tuna, king mackerel, yellowtail snapper. So no shortage of varieties of fish to target down here for sure. I just think that here we are towards the end of March. We're trying to kind of gear up for tarpon season, and we're just dealing with a couple late season cold fronts, which it's like it's time for the transition phase to be over with.
Yep. Time for springtime to get into full gear. I agree with you 100%, my boy. I hope things stay good for you. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, Rick, if you ever want to not wear your jacket, if you go to hell, it's a lot hotter there.
I got no plans to go there, my boy. All right, I appreciate it, Brandon. Thanks.
Later.
All right, thanks to Brandon Storn for a great Islamorada report. Let's check in with 10,000 Islands, the man himself, Captain Steve Dahl. Steve, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Rick. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Off the air, between the two of us, we have figured out that Gilligan's Island was not real, but
no, absolutely not.
But Marianne was. I'll leave it at that.
It sure was. Yeah. So glad you said Marianne and not Ginger.
Marianne and I spent a lot of time together when I was 13.
Oh, that's awesome.
How's your fishing, Cap?
Hey, you know what? We're kind of in the, it's I wouldn't say a grind by any stretch, but definitely slower than what I think it should be. We just coming out of a pretty good cold front, so that's never ideal. The wind blew real hard for a good 10, 11 days, and then it switched straight out of the north, and water temps dropped a little bit, but I think it's probably it's an unseasonable cold front for us. Usually that's kind of done by February, but it's not the end of the world either. Fish are still biting. It's just not blazing hot right now. We're not seeing as many redfish as we normally do sometimes in the spring, but our snook fishing is still real good, and that's kind of what I've been focused on. And I've been doing pretty good on artificials. So those that like to throw artificials, been throwing paddle tail swim baits, a flapping shad, which is a bait by Gambler Lures. They make that's been really good on a jig head. Just kind of hopping those along, skipping them under docks in the urban areas, and out on the points, and in the points and pockets of the mangrove, select mangrove islands. But live bait certainly is going to catch them. You can catch them on shrimp, catch them on pilchards. There's still enough bait around, so that's not really an issue. Our trout is fair, but it's not really trout season. So it's just kind of a transition, and we're just still waiting for tarpon to really, really show up. There are some stragglers, guys catching them on a myriad of different things. Typical tarpon bite. One day they want something, next day they want the next. With the little bit dirtier water that we have, it seems like even cut bait is doing a little bit better. Just kind of throwing some scent out there, so keep that in mind. That could be anything from cut mullet, cut ladyfish, and also catfish tails, hardhead catfish. A lot of people don't know that, but if you cut just the tail portion off, like the stomach down from the behind the rib cage down, you can use those as cut bait. So those are obviously readily available. That's a kind of a passed on tradition through the generations, those catfish tails. So
no shortage of those.
Yeah. So you get that dingy water down by us, and you want to look for tarpon on live or on bait, if you will, as opposed to throwing artificials. You may want to switch over to that cut bait. Obviously, you're going to get into maybe some sharks too, so you got to keep that in mind. But all that being said, fishing's been pretty good.
Let me ask you a question, Steve, before you go. Tarpon is a primary target for you. Obviously, I hear about it all the time.
Sure.
Are you a big believer in big fish or big bait, big fish?
You know what? It's pretty funny. Like I when I bass fished a lot, I really thought, there was an advantage to that of, catching a, 7, 8, 9 pound bass versus, 3 to 5s, which are still really good bass. But I've had a lot of, I like throwing big baits, and I throw big swim baits for tarpon. I throw, sometimes with treble hooks on them, to be honest with you. Just beaten up stuff, stuff that guys would throw, for big bass like in California, things like that. I'm a big believer of, for tarpon specifically, of throwing a big profile bait. And it's not so much, I think, they'll certainly, eat it and can eat it, but the reality is I like the exposure. I want that big silhouette in the water. Some of my biggest, or some of my, when I'm throwing artificial, some of the best baits that I throw are, in real dark hues, blacks and purples, or just straight purple, and a big, big profile. So, I'm not afraid to throw, 5 to, 8 inch, swim baits, for tarpon, just given that big profile. I've kind of noticed that with snook too. If you're really, and that you kind of look at some of the big snook jigs is, probably the best example of that. You're throwing 1.5 ounce, 2 ounce, jigs, often with trailers on the back of them. I mean, it's a large profile bait.
Gotcha.
So with those two specifically, yes. I'm also a big believer that you catch elephants on peanuts too. So I think it's all warranted on conditions. If the fish's metabolism's up, I have no problem throwing it. But if I'm on a cold front or I'm it's the dead of winter, I downsize all my tackle, from everything from leader to hooks to jig heads to everything gets downsized. I like the smaller profiles in the wintertime.
Slower moving metabolism, smaller baits. Absolutely.
Exactly.
As always, Steve, we appreciate the heck out of it. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Oh, absolutely. Can't wait.
You got it. Thanks, Captain Steve Dahl. The year was 1953 when one of the true pioneers of big game fishing just hung it up. No, it wasn't any of our podcasters. It was none other than Ernest Hemingway. I just don't want to do it anymore, he's credited with saying. The tackle has become so sophisticated, the fish just don't have a chance. Can you imagine walking him through the aisles of Strike Zone Fishing and showing him the latest and greatest from Shimano? Can you imagine handing him a Saragusa spinner that weighs less than his bait did and could put more torque on a rampaging tuna than the giant old reels of his day? No, Ernest, I'm afraid you left us way too early. The fights with great fish still go on today, and sometimes we still get beat. But if I were a sea monster of your day, I think I'd still rather do battle with you than face the tools that Shimano has stocked in Strike Zone Fishing 68 years later. All right, thanks to Steve Dahl for a great 10,000 Islands report. Now, let's move up to Southwest Florida and see how our buddy Greg Stamper's doing. Captain Greg, are you there?
I'm here. I hear you loud and clear.
Good. How's life with Snook Stamp Charters?
It's pretty good. We've been out a few times this week, battling a little bit of the cold weather that pushed us in. And, likewise, when we get 10 to 12 degrees of water drop in temperature, it makes things a little tough, which today we kind of ran into that. But we're going to be warming up here real soon, and then things will kind of get back to normal. Before it came in, we did find a few small trout, which is a real positive sign after that red tide that we had a few weeks back. These aren't big fish, but they're fish and they're trout, and that's a positive because to me, those are one of those first fish that kind of either leave or get taken up by it. Other than that, we've been catching a lot of big jacks in the rivers and near the backs of our mangrove system. So if you go to the very back, which is where I've been fishing due to some of that red tide, we're also picking up redfish in there, some black drum. There's a mix of different things like the ladyfish, and of course, you're going to catch a few catfish if you're using any cut baits or live bait. But there's plenty of action to be had.
Gotcha. Well, ain't nothing wrong with that. That's outstanding. As of right now, the red tide is manageable. Am I correct?
Well, where I'm at in the Estero Bay area, Fort Myers Beach, it's not in there at all right now.
Good.
There is some reports of it south of us and off the
kind of like the Marco Island area, give or take.
Mhm.
We've had a lot of north winds recently, which means it's going to push it away from us. When we get in trouble is when it's near shore, Rick, and we start getting those west and southwest winds.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I'm glad to hear it's not messing with you, and I can't wait to talk to you next week.
You got it. I'll talk to you then, Rick.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Greg. Captain Greg Stamper. Let's move on up the West Coast a little bit and check in with Ray Markham. Academy Sports and Outdoors' mission is to provide fun for the whole family by carrying all the best gear from top brands including Columbia, Yeti, Costa, Penn, Shimano, and so many more at prices that you're going to love. Whether you're planning on spending the day at the beach, hosting the friends in the backyard, reeling in a big fish, or gearing up for the game, Academy has a wide assortment of sports and outdoor products that will guarantee you that you're going to have fun out there. Hey, Academy has just opened their new store in Panama City, and look out, Tampa, here they come. You're next on the list. It's a dynamic and fun shopping experience while also offering convenient options such as buy online, pick up in-store, and free shipping on most online orders over $25. When shopping at Academy, customers are going to be able to take advantage of some great in-store services. How about they'll assemble your grill for you or your bike? How about scope mounting, bore sighting, line winding and spooling, propane exchanges? They've got the pros to get it done and the ability to purchase hunting and fishing licenses. With Academy's best price guarantee, if you find a better advertised price anywhere, not only will Academy match it, but they'll beat it by 5%. Until the new store in Tampa opens, you can shop online at academy.com or through Academy's mobile app. You can sign up for email alerts, receive digital ads, offers, and exchange with Academy's social media accounts. Academy Sports and Outdoors. Right stuff, low price, every day. All right, thanks to Greg Stamper for I tell you what, I was worried to call him to hear about the red tide, but down in Fort Myers, they seem to be clear and looking good. Let's see if it's so fortunate up around West Central. How about it, Ray Markham? You see any red tide?
Well, I mean, there's a few little hints here and there, but with the winds coming out of the north for this front, it's kind of had a tendency to push it out and down a little bit.
Good.
So it's probably further south from where we are, I believe. So other than that, I mean, I can't complain too much, except the fish can't figure out whether it's summer, winter, spring, or fall. Or
Ain't
whatever.
that the truth? Yep.
So, yeah, we've had some water temperatures dropping a good probably 8 to 10 degrees over the last couple of days or so. We had 80-some degree temperatures towards the end of last week and beginning of the weekend, and then all of a sudden, kind of fertilizer hit the ventilator and things went south again. So we're looking at a lot of wind. That kept a lot of guys that were anticipating an offshore run at the dock, sitting there playing pinochle or whatever they do. But inshore, it hasn't been all that bad. I can't complain too much. Catching a few trout here and there. No great concentrations of them, or not a lot of big trout, but I mean, it's a far cry better than it was a few weeks ago. Redfish seem to be in pretty good shape. Up the upper end of Tampa Bay has been really good. The east side of Tampa Bay has been very good. And even down into Palmasola, down near upper Sarasota Bay has not been all that bad. So, no complaints here. Snook action has been very good. I think this 40 some odd degree air temperature over the night tonight and tomorrow is going to slow that down a bit. But hopefully they're probably cruising back either into some deep water bends of the rivers and creeks or somewhere down close to the passes, because we had a lot of fish that were starting to move out on the flats and even a few of them in the passes, and it's like way early for a spawn even to be thinking about. But, fish were there. So guys are catching a few pompano, a stray, a Spanish mackerel, and some bluefish coming inside the bays. And that's about it in here. Outside guys, if they're able to get out, most of them are not venturing too far offshore, staying within 60 to 80 feet of water, and they're doing fairly well with some red grouper still. Quite a few throwbacks at this point. And they're doing actually still pretty well with hogfish. So no complaints there. And what I'm hearing from the guys that are targeting snapper, the mangrove snapper, are a little bigger than normal in that depth range this time of year. Typically we look June, July, right in there, August, around the full moons when they start getting bigger and coming in closer inshore for some big spawners. So no complaints really. Guys are still catching some sheep's heads. So this foul of weather is probably going to be good for them. So no complaints.
Good deal. Well, I'm certainly glad to hear that. I was almost scared to call you. I was afraid the red tide had filled you guys in, but sounds to me like everybody's pretty well dodged it so far. I hope that's the case. Cap, as always, we appreciate it. And if it's all right with you, we'll check with you next week.
Yes, sir. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Cap. Captain Ray Markham. You know, I'll bet you don't even remember the days that all us cool kids would rub baby oil mixed with iodine to help us get even darker in the summertime. Being burnt was cool, and even if you weren't a surfing legend, you sure looked the part. Oh, man, if a bunch of us old guys paid the price for our vanity. We never knew the skin problem and health damage that awaited us. Today's fishermen have the options of being so much healthier in the sun than we ever thought of. Thanks in no small part to the Castaway Hat Company, who not only provides our podcasters with Castaway straw hats, but they make the coolest prints on the underside of the brims you ever saw. You may think your bimini top or T-top blocks the sun, but as an awful lot of us OGs can tell you, you can't have enough protection from sun damage. Do what we do. Put on the sunblock and put on your Castaway straw hat. You'll look the part of today's best anglers, and you'll even be helping the environment. That's because for each Castaway hat sold, the Castaway Company is going to pay to have 1 pound of trash removed from our waterways. The burning Florida sun won't be raced in your skin, and believe me, when you age a few years, you'll thank us old guys with a lifetime on the water. So go to CastawayHatCo.com and get your best sun protection today. The Castaway Hat Company. They've got a hat for every adventure. Our thanks to Grumpy Ray Markham for his West Central report. Let's check in with Captain Sunshine himself, William Toney in the Big Bend. How we doing, Skip?
Doing good. You know, we reverted back from real warm weather, had a pretty good front come through this week. In fact, this morning in my house, it was 36 degrees. And the funny thing was, the people I fished with on Friday, and we had a really good day, and I said, but, Monday I have to recalculate, reevaluate, and start from the beginning again, and they quite didn't understand that. But if I could tell you today, there was the surface of the moon out there. It looked like Mars with all the different lime rock and rocks sticking up and everything like that just from the northeast wind and negative tides. But you know what? If you really want to learn the area, those are the days you need to be out.
That's the days to go. You ain't kidding.
Yep. But we did good. Caught a limited trout. As far as red fishing goes, it also offers really good opportunity if you're into fly fishing for sight casting. When the water's still chilly like it is right now, you got, very, very good visibility out there, and it takes a team to do it. You need someone out there to pull the boat and an angler on the front. And the way I used to do it with a buddy would be like me on the bow, and I get my shot, and after that shot, we switch off, and I pull, and they get their shot. But it's a real fun way to fish. And, you get this little window. Now, we're going to get into probably the end of the month in April, and things are just going to start kicking off into regular type of summer, early summer weather. But right now, the water clarity is really good. We got some triple tail still on the buoys out there, getting a lot of nice sheep's head on the rocks, a little bit deeper than 12 feet. Folks are heading out to 15 to 18 feet, so there's still some sheep's head out there spawning. But we got snook in right now. No tide for redfish, but if you're into fly fishing, now's your chance to get at them where it's really good sight casting conditions.
Gotcha. Yeah, we've had very clear water here too, and our sight casters have had a ball the last few days. William, as always, we appreciate the heck out of the report. I'm hoping for warmer weather for both of us. I talked to our boy down that does the Islamorada report for us, and he said he wears a jacket about to keep warm about no days a year. I told him.
Oh, wow.
I told him exactly where he could go live. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Guys at our latitude don't appreciate that.
You better have good bibs and a good jacket. That's all I can tell you.
Roger's on that. Thank you, buddy. We appreciate it so much, William.
See you next week.
See you next week, Captain William Toney. Now let's head out west until we run into one Captain Kevin Lanier. Kevin, how are you?
Hey, Captain Rick, we're doing just great. Just wonderful. How about yourself?
I'm doing outstanding now that I remembered your first name is not Greg.
Well, that's good. I appreciate that.
I'm glad. Tell me how the fishing's going out there.
Well, fishing this week's been good. We've had a little bit of weather, as you know. We had a great opportunity to spend a week last week in Venice, Louisiana, so we got really spoiled. But we're back into it this week. Out with vermilions and black snapper and some Almaco jacks. And we threw back more 10 to 12 pound red snapper than we care to count.
I tell you what, Cap, I stopped. We were offshore wahoo fishing the other day, and I took the middle of the day to take a break to try and catch vermilions and triggers. So just mix up our box a little bit. I am telling you, red 12 to 15 inch red snapper. You couldn't, and our favorite way to catch vermilions is to drop to the bottom and then come up about a half a dozen cranks because they're almost always on top of the red snapper and the grunts. Kevin, you couldn't do it. Forget it. Mm-hmm. You couldn't get to the bottom and get off of it without having two red snapper on.
Oh, I believe you. Yes, it happens all the time.
It's beyond crazy. No doubt about that. But how are your vermilions biting? Pretty good?
Yeah, they're biting pretty good. Once you find the pockets, you can load up on them. They've been really concentrated. The water temps are slowly starting to come up, but it's still a little on the cool side.
Yep. I agree with that 100%. I tell you what, we've been talking about earlier in the podcast, big fish, big baits, or big bait, big fish theory. I think when it comes to catching trigger fish and vermilions, the exact opposite is true. I think it's small baits, big fish, don't you?
I agree. I'm more inclined to right bait, big fish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, that makes perfect sense. It sure does. All right, Cap, we appreciate the heck out of it. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
We will be back next week with bells on.
All right, Kevin, we appreciate it. We'll talk to you then. Captain Kevin Lanier from Northwest Florida. And Captain Kevin Lanier wraps up our trip around the state tonight. Gosh, it was a lot of fun. A lot of guys had opinions on big bait, big fish. And I think what we learned was some species it's important. Some species it's certainly not. Hey, think about this. Next time you catch a fish, look at the size of his mouth. Okay? For fish with smaller mouths, it's not big bait, big fish. For a tarpon, a snook, a largemouth bass, a grouper, it very often is big bait, big fish. Just a little tip there. You're not going to ever see a whiting that can swallow a whole shrimp, just like you're not going to see a redfish that can swallow a whole crab. So just think about it. Next time you set your bait out, what does his mouth look like? That'll give you a clue as to what size bait to fish. Florida Sportsman Action Spotter is brought to you this week and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature together. By Tournament Master Chum. It's the best chum on earth, all right. By Nosara Paradise Rentals, your dream vacation. By D.O.A. Lures, the unfair advantage. By Young Boats, you want the finest in flats, bay, and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. By Castaway Hat Company, the hat that's helping save our seas. And by Academy Sports and Outdoors, right stuff, low price, every day. For Florida Sportsman Magazine, until next week, hey, here's what I'd love for you to do. I'd love you to go on your favorite podcast service, rate us, and send us a question that you'd like the pros to comment on. What do you want to learn from the best fishermen in Florida? You can do that, and we'll pose that question to them next week when we come back with another Florida Sportsman Action Spotter podcast. Until then, I'm Captain Rick Riles, and we'll see you on the rip.